Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first here, we've got the open house tomorrow, Weather Service open house tomorrow, located out at 6930 Sand Lake Road, and it'll be open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Tomorrow, Saturday, August 17th, and again, come by and you can see how the operation works. And it's at, again, 6930 Sand Lake Road. On to the, no advisories or warnings out for the state tonight. So moving on from the hazardous weather graphic to satellite imagery. Here's that system slowly moving in here across toward the northeast, spreading some clouds after a sunny morning, after a sunny start to the day here over the Cook Inlet Kenai Peninsula area. Still a lot of sunshine up here through the central interior down to the Copper River Basin. Clouds on the increase there in Prince William Sound, and not a bad day here across the Panhandle, although again more clouds and some isolated showers over in the northern areas, which this imagery doesn't really pick up. Mostly just picks up the location of the higher top clouds associated with the main storm activity. And associated with this right here, you can see some moisture back toward the Seward Peninsula. More clouds up there from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And another band of clouds here shifting eastward across the central Aleutians. Not a lot of weather associated with that. Next storm developing is down off the chart there. But you can see that, again, nice start to the day here over southern Alaska, actually even from northeast Bristol Bay. But this moisture slipping on up with some rainfall coming in, mostly along the southwest coast, Alaska Peninsula today, up to about Kodiak and then back toward the Pribilofs. Otherwise, as I mentioned, the North Gulf Coast, dry, light winds and dry conditions over most of the Panhandle. There were a few isolated showers up here over the northern areas, amounts just a few hundredths of an inch, and even more isolated over the Wrangell Mountains and North Gulf Coast area, with generally partly sunny skies, a few breaks there for Prince William Sound, as well as the Copper River Basin and over south central Alaska here. But now the mid clouds, high clouds already spreading up in over Cook Inlet, location of the frontal boundary, midday or at today, right about in this location here. And starting to slow down its progression now, with the low center starting to stall and will be drifting northward here overnight tonight. Otherwise, clouds developing. This all cumulus clouds with the daytime heating occurring over the central interior areas. Not much in the way of any shower activity developing there. Could be here by the early evening hours, maybe a few scattered showers up in this area in the central interior. There were some along that weak trough up to the northeast there. Actually north of Eagle up into the eastern Brooks Range, just scattered showers, partly mostly cloudy skies. Some areas low clouds, fog and drizzle along possibly the eastern Arctic coastal areas. Otherwise not a bad day, fog lifting in the Barrow area. And then some moisture here, light rain and reduced visibilities from the western Seward Peninsula in towards St. Lawrence Island, but amounts again quite light. Heavier rainfall amounts though with this low pressure area in the trough extending back in toward the Pribilofs. St. Paul picked up about a half an inch of rain. Again, the 12-hour period ending at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And let's see, the Cape Newenham, right about there. Ahead of the front earlier this morning, they had winds gusting to 55 miles per hour out of the south-southeast. That's now diminished with the front moving through. They also had the heaviest rainfall amount today, nearly 2 inches falling with that system, while Sand Point picked up a little over half an inch in the same time period there. And again, Akiak about a third of an inch of rain, lighter amounts to the northeast. There's a rain slowly spreading up across Kodiak Island in toward Cook Inlet. Southern Kuskokwim or Kamishak Bay reporting location at about a quarter of an inch of rain so far with this system. Back out to the west, just a lot of clouds, areas of fog, and not much in the way of precipitation for the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. And for tonight, we'll keep a chance of rain, light rain at times, cloudy skies, fog, St. Lawrence Island, isolated showers over the Seward Peninsula. Otherwise, this front really moving slow and starting to weaken. Chance of rain, Kodiak Island pushing up in towards southern Cook Inlet tonight, but the interior staying pretty good. Definitely precipitation free over the central and western areas, except for the lingering showers up over the Seward Peninsula, which will be pretty isolated. So not too bad here. This front, again, in the low pressure center, really starting to weaken. Still a trough back across the Pribilofs, keeping it kind of showery, cloudy, maybe a little fog and unsettled conditions in that location, as well as trailing back in toward the central Aleutians. A very weak low out here over the western Aleutians. Bring some IFR, fog, drizzle to the western areas. And in fact, IFR, a pretty good bet anywhere in the Bering Sea, especially the central and southern areas to the Aleutians overnight tonight. And generally becoming mostly cloudy for south central Alaska. And just a risk of a few showers here from the Alaska Range, central Alaska Range area on down toward mainly the Wrangell Mountains. Maybe there northeast Prince William Sound could see an isolated shower or two, and that same pattern extends right into the northern panhandle in spite of this 1,023 millibar surface high that's parked just northeast of the Skagway area. Not quite enough to eliminate the moisture altogether. Different story down south, a little more offshore flow. Probably will see some, definitely it'll be dry with some clearing possibly as well throughout the night, overnight tonight. And still a risk with a weak trough of some IFR. It will probably likely be IFR along with some drizzle and light rain for the eastern Arctic coastal areas. But general easterly flow here, keeping it maybe VFR on the western coast on down into the Kivalina, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne areas. And then for tomorrow, we'll see next developing system here and a big push of moisture associated with a warm front coming north and northeastward in toward Kodiak Island. Rain spreading back up tomorrow afternoon with that system. The original front here just washes out, and a portion of that slips on up, brings some rain and fog to the central eastern North Gulf Coast areas, Yakutat, Cordova, into Prince William Sound, eastward to about Elfin Cove, and then some showers, again, remnants of that frontal boundary, northeastward there across the southwest interior. Not really getting north of the Alaska Range here, but there'll be some isolated showers with this feature up here and areas of light rain up over the northwest and western Brooks Range. Look for some partly sunny skies for the North Slope and western Arctic coast as well. There's low clouds and fog possible. Really a day much like today up there along the Arctic coast, and maybe a little bit of a pickup in the east-northeast breezes, but definitely rain, moderate to heavy at times, coming back up to the Alaska Peninsula ahead of that developing system. And we'll see that develops into quite a storm that rolls up into the Bristol Bay area, southeast Bering, really dominating much of southern Alaska here, actually about the southern half of the state. Pretty strong winds, south-southeast, 40, 60, 65, maybe even as high as 70 miles an hour in the channeled areas of the Aleutian and western Alaska Range. Also some pretty good gusty winds coming around the backside of it. It looks like gales for sure out of the north-northwest, and somewhat of a narrow band here sweeping right in back across the Alaska Peninsula. Less of that effect over the eastern Aleutians, but rain moderate to heavy at times. Upslope areas of the Aleutian Range, probably Kodiak, and also the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Looks very wet with heavy rain pretty likely. And look at the low temperatures forecast for tonight. 50 in the north to lower to mid-50s down to the south for the Panhandle. 30s North Slope, Brooks Range, and Arctic coast with even 40, upper 30s down in toward Eagle. Otherwise, upper 40s to lower 50s here to the southwest. Highs for tomorrow, 65 to 70, upper Yukon Valley, lower to mid-60s through the central interior, back out toward roughly Kotzebue, and lower to mid-60s here over the northeast Bristol Bay area on the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, and temperatures pushing possibly into the lower 70s over the southern panhandle, and cooler to the north. Lows not much different from what you'll see tomorrow, and for the outlook on, or for the lows for Bristol Bay here, mid-50s, and generally in the lower 50s here over the southwest interior, 30s again for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Highs for Sunday, 68 to 72 over the central and northeast interior, mid-Tanana Valley. Lower 60s, south central Alaska, pushing up into the lower 70s for the southern panhandle. Otherwise 50s over the Aleutian.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic here, IFR streaming northeastward right in across southern Alaska. Here stays VFR in the north, and for tomorrow morning, central eastern Arctic coast, looks like it'll be IFR, VFR back to the west there, and some lower conditions here over the northern panhandle. And then for the afternoon, it's pretty much VFR here across just nearly all the southeast coast. IFR, Gulf of Alaska to the North Gulf Coast. Some of that slipping on up into the areas of the Copper River Basin, mostly southern southeast mountains there, and along the Alaska Range, especially out to the west. VFR in the interior, north of the Alaska Range, all the way out to the Arctic coast. The North Slope looking pretty good. And IFR here into the Kuskokwim Bay area, Togiak Bay, across southern Kuskokwim Valley right up to the western Alaska Range, and widespread IFR out here over the Bering Sea and much of the Aleutians. And for Sunday morning, IFR here, central eastern Arctic coast, inland a ways there into the North Slope. Brooks Range pretty much in the VFR zone, as is the Selawik, Kobuk Valley, Kotzebue Sound, eastward across the upper Yukon, and Tanana Valley, VFR. IFR along and south and east of the central and western Alaska Range, and then cutting across the Kuskokwim Valley out to the southwest coast to the Pribilof, southward to the eastern Aleutians, northeastward here to Kodiak. IFR covers the Gulf of Alaska up to the North Gulf Coast into the northern panhandle, marginal VFR farther out to the west. And then for Sunday afternoon, VFR here, extreme southern panhandle, otherwise marginal becoming IFR along all the coastline there. IFR up to Yakutat, across Prince William Sound, east side of Kodiak Island, and along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, with marginal VFR possibly trying to get into the Tanana Valley there, but generally up here it's going to be VFR. And less IFR now out over the Bering Sea, here over the eastern areas there, Nunivak Island up to the Yukon Delta coast, back around into Togiak Bay again. But the Pribilof's marginal, much of the Aleutians, Bering Sea now, marginal VFR, so kind of a improvement out there. And for passes tomorrow, both Anatuvik and Anagan, VFR. Lake Clark, IFR becoming marginal, same forecast for rain. Looks like the lowest conditions in the morning, improving in the afternoon, but tomorrow evening, next surge of moisture will bring IFR back into both these passes. Same trend for rainy, IFR becoming marginal. And windy, marginal VFR. Isabel, same forecast, marginal at times. Montesta, I think, will stay VFR all day long. And Tanita, starting out marginal, improving to VFR, probably by noontime at the latest. And then for Portage, IFR trending upward to about marginal. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR to start early in the day and then becoming VFR for most of the late morning and afternoon hours. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet there, right around Kaktovik, sloping up to about 10,000 feet here, Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak, eastward across northern panhandle, 12,000 feet toward Dixon entrance. Same pattern out here, cold pool up there over the Russian Far East, 4 warm to 10,000 feet over the southern Bering. And for icing, moisture sliding northeastward, first surge kind of elongating out along the North Gulf Coast into the Copper River Basin, maybe some moderate here down toward the Iliam or Kamishak Bay area and Aleutian Range. Next surge of moisture right through here. A little more widespread of the considerable moderate, but that's going to be above 9,000 feet down in this area, but that'll be sliding northeastward tomorrow evening into southern Alaska on that southerly jet here. One jet max coming through with the first surge of moisture, next surge, and then the storm developing out here for Sunday. It'll bring the wind into southern Alaska. This trough dropping southeastward, so the panhandle kind of in between tomorrow. And for 9,000 feet, southerlies up to 50 knots here coming into Kodiak Island. Pretty light and variable under a general ridge of high pressure, or more of a lack of storminess rather than the presence of high pressure here over the eastern interior. Light winds up to the Arctic coast. Low center, northern Bering Sea, not too windy around that, maybe 10 to 20, and that's about it. Northerlies 15 to 20, possibly 25 knots over the Aleutians. And a band of pretty good northwesterlies, 25 to 30 right along the and off the southeast coast, but much lighter over the inland areas. 3,000 feet, much the same pattern, strongest winds along the southeast coast there and to the west. Next storm down to the south of the Aleutians tomorrow, and the strongest winds with that, but not quite affecting the area until tomorrow night and Sunday. Turbulence looking like this. Moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians to Kodiak Island.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining me today are not just one, but two people, both with the last name Stevens, which is even more fun, but no relation. We have Eric Stevens from Dehne and George Stevens, who is a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Awesome. And today you guys brought a really cool toy, or I should say tool, with you. It's a sandbox, but why are you guys working on a sandbox?
Well, it's part of our senior design project, and we were approached by AKwx to build this for them. They had a proof of concept that they developed about a year ago, I think, and they wanted a more robust version that they could pack onto a plane and take places, and it's a handy learning tool for kids and adults.
So you're a mechanical engineering student. You've built a traveling sandbox for the experimental program to stimulate competitive research, EPSCoR, and Dehne's facilitated this. But why do we need a traveling sandbox?
Well, the prototype was such a big hit that they decided they wanted another one, actually two, that that would be easier to travel with, you know, possibly marketable even.
Okay, so this is a traveling sandbox that's got a lot of bits and pieces and a computer hooked up to it. What is the computer doing with the sand?
The computer actually uses a Kinect sensor to read the topography of the sand or the shape of the sand, and then the computer translates that into information which it projects using a projector onto the sand, showing topographical lines and which is representative of the shape of the sand.
Okay, so this is a live mapping tool?
Yeah. It's interactive. As you're moving your hands through it, it is actively following and changing the lines to fit what you're doing.
That sounds like something I could have in my backyard.
Yep.
It'd be a lot of fun. So you guys had to change the design a little bit to make this more Alaska-fied, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, how'd you do that?
Well, the original was made out of basically lumber and Simpson strong tie type stuff, and we rebuilt it to make it lighter and basically more transportable. We can pack it down to a fairly small size, and it can be loaded onto a plane and flown anywhere in the state.
Which you guys did today. And you have plans to take this in other places of Alaska, right?
Yep, we're actually going to be headed down to Homer with it later today.
Okay, very good. Eric, how does this fit into science learning around Alaska?
Well, you know what? I think it is a tool and it is a toy, and it brings out a smile from an 8-year-old and the smile from a 48-year-old with that inner 8-year-old wanting to get out. The sandbox, it's an interactive learning tool that teaches us how topography in the 3 dimensions is related to, say, a 2-dimensional map. More about that later. Just like George was saying, it's got a Kinect sensor, not just for video games anymore. It can sense out the lay of the land there, feeds that information in the computer identifies that, sends a signal to a projector to send topographic lines to map over that lumpy ground. So you get a 3-dimensional topo map out of it. And my favorite thing about it, this is the thing that stops people at the trade show, they stop at your booth and don't leave, is that you run your hand through that sandbox and it responds in real time. It remaps the topography as you get to be Mr. Tectonic Plate Drifter there. You can make things how you want. Well, what if we made a really high mountain here and a low valley there, and the lines adjust to what you did? It's a learning tool because it shows you that connection between these 2-dimensional topo lines and what's really out in Alaska. And Alaska's a place with all kinds of topography. You know, we're from the Great Plains, where topo maps tend to be just like blank pieces of paper, but Alaska is particularly gifted in this regard, and this tool helps us, I think, learn more about our state, really.
Absolutely. And so this is going to enhance STEM learning, the science, technology, engineering, and math, in many different locations around Alaska then. This would be something that kids and teachers can get their hands on.
It sure is. And I mentioned it's like flypaper at a booth that, or at the Science Potpourri when we had Greg's original version of this sandbox, and that one was made out of scraps of wood, and it was a prototype. But even that one, before it had some of the refinements that George and crew have made for this newer, upscaled, maybe a 2.0 version of the sandbox, even that one was so attractive to people. It just demonstrated that this has potential to be a learning tool, an outreach tool, an education tool that now is portable and can go places in Alaska Of course, there's only one sandbox, can't be everywhere at once, but hopefully it gets out there, gets the word out about EPSCoR and what science is being done here for Alaskans.
All right, that sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to get my hands in the sand and try this out for myself. We're going to demonstrate this here in our next segment of Alaska Weather Facts. But before we go, we want to remind you that EPSCoR, which is a new acronym for me now, but I'm going to remember this because you can follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and I invite you to do that. Alaska EPSCoR is also something that facilitates science learning at the University of Alaska around the state, and that stands for Experimental Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. So check that out, and make sure you tune in tomorrow because we're going to have the next version where we actually get our hands in the sand and check out how this works and demonstrates that topography. So for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and we'll see you again next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Again, not a lot changed from yesterday, the day before. Maybe a little bit less here, thinning out yet with some open water getting in very close to Point Barrow. That's about the only change. Still not much different here on the east side. And back to the Chukchi Sea, this heavier ice, multi-year pack ice, holding in place there. And light northerly winds continue to push the ice southward, slowly southward, actually peeling ice off, and that will be melting in the warmer waters of the Chukchi Sea. And other than that, no big changes coming up for the next several days, just a continuation of the slow thaw that we're currently seeing. And for the coastal water forecast on the Panhandle smoke craft advisories, tomorrow northwest 25 knots, seas 6 to 8 feet, northwest 20 for Clarence Strait with 4-foot seas. Pretty light northwesterlies there for Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal south at 20, and west-southwest 15. Not a bad day windwise up here on the north coast, the seas at about 5 to 6 feet. And then small craft advisories for Sunday, northern Lynn Canal 25 out of the south, still light winds there for Stevens Passage, basically southwest with 2-foot seas. And northwest at 15 for Clarence Strait, seas 3 feet. We've got west-northwesterlies now at about 20 on the south coast. Those seas at about 6 feet. West-southwest at 15 with 7-foot seas up to the north. And for Cook Inlet tomorrow, call it light variable winds at 10, seas 1 to 3 feet. Small craft advisories, Kamishek Bay, and the Barrens for south-southeasterlies at 25, west 25, and south 25 here for the North Gulf Coast. So small craft advisories in these zones with 7 to 8-foot seas, northeast 20, seas 4 feet there for Prince William Sound. And the next day, Sunday, gales coming into the picture here with that big storm moving in toward Bristol Bay. So south 35 for the Barren Islands, southeast 35, Kamishek Bay, southern Cook Inlet. Big increase in the winds from what you'll see tomorrow. South 30 knots, seas building to 10 feet, staying light north of the Forelands. Small craft advisories here for the North Gulf Coast, as well as Prince William Sound, looking for those winds southeast 25 and seas building to 6 feet. Outlook for Kodiak on for the first day of the weekend, south to southwest 25 knots about sums it up. Southerlies 30 knots here from Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, and then north side much lighter, southeast 20. Bristol Bay south of 15 with 4-foot seas. And now the big winds coming in with that storm on Sunday. We've got full gales, in fact actually storm force winds, southwest 55 knots, seas building to 30 feet here on the south side of the Alaska Peninsula from Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape. Almost storms here from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, south 45, 25-foot seas. Southerly gales 35 to 40 knots for Kodiak Island, southeast 40 Bristol Bay. Outlook for the Aleutians on Saturday. South winds 30 knots there, south of Unalaska Island, otherwise east, northeast at about 20, turning north-northeast 20. Central Aleutians, light winds out to the west. And those stay relatively light out here over the western Aleutians on Sunday, increasing to 25 to 30 here for Adak and Atka, and 40 to 50 knot winds for the Fox Islands there, strongest across Unalaska Island, westerlies 40 to 50 knots there with seas 17 to 26 feet. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, we've got kind of a variable wind direction here depending on which side of Nunivak Island you're on. Otherwise, the Pribilof northeast of 15, north 15 St. Matthew Island, northeast for St. Lawrence Island, still at 15. And bring the gales in on Sunday, east 40 knots, south of Nunivak Island, north 35 on the north side, northwest 35 to 40, coming around the backside of that low across the Pribilofs, and north 30 for St. Lawrence Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, well, the central and east side, west-northwest at about 10. That's roughly it. The western coast here, northeast 20 knots all the way down to Cape Thompson, and then a tad lighter from Cape Thompson to the Bering Strait. Sunday, see a big jump in those winds, 30-knot easterlies here, so small craft advisories from Wales up the west side, probably to Point Ley, and then northeast of Point Ley, dropping down to 15 toward the central coast out of the north, and then west-northwest at 10 knots continue for the eastern coastline. And for tonight, we've got this one system trying to push some rain northeastward. We're really starting to weaken as it does later tonight. It'll still spread some rain to Kodiak Island and back across the southwest interior, otherwise staying dry over the western interior areas. Risk of a shower Seward Peninsula. Same thing here over the southeast interior into the northern panhandle, but very light whatever precipitation falls, as well as eastern north slope. And then next system rolling up on Sunday really develops into a strong low moving just south of Cape Newenham, that tight pressure field. Storm force winds, gales, and possible gusts 40 to 65 or 70 miles an hour in the mountainous terrain of southern Alaska. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.